Oh my goodness. There we are. We are live on YouTube. I am going to pull up this link for us and share that for you in the chat. That way we can get everything. We'll share that on the Facebooks as well. So on the Book of Faces. And there we go. Cool beans, guys. All right. Hopefully we will have everybody start tuning in here in just a minute. Cool. Looks like we are ready to go. All right, let's get started. So, everybody, thank you for coming to the social hour yet again. It's Tuesday. Welcome back, guys. Today, I'm really excited. Fantasy and reality with fantastical cosplay composites that look straight out of a movie. He's joined the PRO EDU community as a 3D instructor, and he teaches people Photoshop techniques and other cool tips and tricks to help them get the most out of their images on his YouTube channel. He is just blowing up all over the place lately. I cannot wait to get we just lost everything there for a second. What happened? What
I can see you now.
We lost. We are gone. Oh, we have to start over again. What happened? Are we still there? Hey, Bobby, hi. Are we still here? If you guys are in the comments, I think we got, I don't know what happened. Are we here? Are we here? I think we are. I think we're there.
Maybe.
It looks like it. I think we are. Guys, if we are still live, it looks like we're live. If we're still live, let me see. Of course, something wonky is going to happen naturally.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't either. It's the weirdest thing that has ever happened. Just wonky. What is it about today that it seems like everything is going crazy?
I have no idea. I'm still struggling to figure out what day it is half the time.
Dude, I'm telling you. I think we're good. It looks like we're good. Cool. All right, everybody. Yes, we're here. Cool. Okay, thank you. Bobby's here. Jason's here. Other Jason's is here. Hi, guys. Awesome. All right. It looked like things were just nuts for a while. But one more time, let me say again, welcome to the social hour. Our guest today is Dustin Valkema. He's a photographer and 3D artist who blends fantasy and reality with fantastical cosplay composites that look straight out of a movie. He's also joined the PRO EDU community as a 3D instructor and teaches people Photoshop techniques and other tips and tricks to help them get the most out of their images on his YouTube channel. So one more time, Dustin, thanks for being here, man.
Yeah. No, thanks for having me, Nicole. I appreciate it. This is fun. I've been watching kind of all of your social hours, so it's nice to finally be able to link up and hop on here together and chat.
Yeah, I'm excited. So many cool things to talk about. So before we get into kind of the thick of all the cool questions, it's the prerequisite. How have you been doing with COVID?
Oh, it's been interesting. So while kind of COVID started, I was working at a studio in the 3D CGI industry, and we started working from home. Kids kind of got out of school, I guess, early, and that kind of threw all the schedules off a little bit. And so, yeah, it's been a bit of adapting. I've enjoyed it. It's kind of forced a bit of a slowdown, just in life pace and everything like that. And so it's been a good chance to kind of balance a little bit and focus on that. But at the same time, it's been super hectic, kind of all over the place. So, I mean, we're surviving. We're doing pretty good. So
Yeah, right on. And
yeah.
I mean, like as tricky as everything is, most of your work has been done from home in the first place, right? I mean, you do a lot of work at home, or were you working
So
in studio?
I was actually working in studio. So that's kind of the life that people don't know that I had for the most
Right.
part. So I was actually I was an industry studio artist, working full time. And for me, all of the cosplay stuff, all of the kind of cool 3D backgrounds and 3D art stuff like that, that was kind of all just essentially a side hustle, a side business that was more of a creative outlet for me. Um, and so it definitely gave me time to do that more. And, now I'm working with Pro EDU, amazing team. And it really gives a lot more freedom and flexibility. And, we really prioritize balance there. So it's really nice to be able to kind of, take a weight off your shoulders in that sense and just have the ability to create and then also help and instruct and mentor other creatives, which is always a blessing. So, yeah,
Yeah, agreed.
it's great.
So some pretty good things coming out of all this craziness.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because in the midst of all of the negatives that people are, you see it all over on social, and for me it's kind of been a chance to step back and really take a look at things, for what they are. It kind of brought everything to face value, between COVID and current world events. And it's just, if you take it as such, it's a good opportunity to kind of step back, kind of deal with the rough times for a little bit. It's not really different than life in general because we all go through struggles. But it's kind of been a good opportunity for me personally just to kind of slow down, slow my brain down, like focus on things that are important, and find a way to persevere through it. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's been interesting.
Yeah, a lot of the people I've talked to have a similar story where they're kind of finding this as a time for reflection, and that they've actually had the time to be able to look at their lives and decide kind of where they want to go with their future. So I know for some people, obviously there's all of the terrible things that are included in this entire pandemic package, but there's usually some kind of a silver lining there if you can find it.
Definitely.
So, like diving right in. So you said before, the secret life of Dustin V, the one that people didn't know about, you're working as a 3D artist. So what exactly were you doing? What was your job like?
So I was a CGI team lead. So I had a bunch of cool artists that I kind of, I guess, supervised. I don't really like to use that word. It's one of those interesting things because I mean, I worked right alongside them.
Sure.
But essentially, I was, a supervisor of the 3D kind of lighting and rendering team. And we would do a lot of post production. It was all essentially just creating photorealistic product renders, for ads, for commercial work, all, list goes on with that. But for me, it was one of those things that was great because I got to work with other talented artists and not only mentor them, but learn from them as well. I feel like everybody's got something to bring to the table creatively. Um, so it was a lot of team problem solving, a lot of figuring things out on the fly, and just kind of meshing all of our experience together to make stuff work. So
Yeah. So what kind of jobs were you guys doing? Was it just one of those kind of whatever you guys get commissioned for, or were you working on really specific stuff like commercials or print work?
Right. Primarily we worked in the contract furniture industry. So larger companies, like say Crate and Barrel, for example, we would start to build a lot of photo reel sets for them and place their products in, render those for catalogs, for, their web promotions, all of their product imagery that's on, that goes onto their website and different things like that. So yeah, it was building cool sets and rendering products in them. So
right on. So having that experience, and then and we'll get to some of the other more creative stuff, I think, in a little bit, but having that experience and then seeing where the industry is going for photographers, you must have a really good sense of that connection between, I mean, photographers are losing ground a little bit, right? And we're kind of seeing this jobs that used to be before the advent of CGI, right? All of this used to be photographer stuff. Like if they had a chair, it was given to a photographer in studio somewhere who photographed it. As then CGI kind of started catching up in realism and everything. And so we've lost ground a little bit there.
I really don't like to think of it as losing ground. So I guess this is the rough part, and people can hate it or love it, but this is my opinion on it. If photographers simply think that looking through a physical camera is their end all in the way of the future, they're wrong. Things are adapting, things are evolving, things are changing. It's no different from when we went from film to digital. And it's just progression. I mean, it's kind of how things happen. And CGI has been able to fill a gap that a camera can't do so easily, as far as, essentially rendering out 3,000 products in a single environment and still be cost effective and so on. CGI is able to come in and do that fairly quickly, compared to most set building and timelines in that sense. Automotive photography, like it's already been taken over, I'd say 95+% by CGI. And, it's just evolving. It's one of those things that, as for me as a 3D artist, I look at it. So I got into photography after I was into CGI and building, 3D stuff. At that time, I never really looked at it as, say, the end all, or where, say, product photography or automotive photography was going to be replaced. I looked at it as, hey, this is evolving. This is an easy way to start looking at adding new skill sets for photographers. And so that's kind of the cool part about what we're doing at PRO EDU right now, is sort of trying to bridge some of that mindset, because there is a lot of, say, a learning curve. There's new software, new tools. I mean, cameras can evolve as much as they want, but at the same time, a lot of companies are starting to request or require, 3D renders. And it's just another avenue for that photographer to keep their business afloat and continue pushing forward, especially in times like right now with COVID. It's, you may not be able to get out and shoot all day, and a lot of companies are starting to work more remotely and looking to CGI to fill these gaps. And 3D artists are, starting to find more work, and the photographers that only focus strictly on photography and didn't ever venture out are starting to find maybe some rough times, or have, as things were a little bit closer to lockdown status in most places. But yeah, it's evolving. I wouldn't say it's really, I wouldn't say that photographers are, kind of off the deep end. I just feel like, as things change, artists have to change, creatives have to change. If we don't adapt, I guess we die. It's kind of the nature of the way things work. So yeah, it's evolving, it's changing. And so we should just kind of openly embrace it and change with it. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, it's the same struggle as when digital cameras started taking over, or when Photoshop became a huge part of workflow. You know, there's always people who are married to the way things used to be before, and you know, then they find it hard to adapt, hard to adjust to the kind of the changing environment as new technology becomes possible. So it's
Right.
definitely something to think about. But you know, I think it, as a photographer who obviously focused purely on the craft, if you haven't ventured into that area and you were working in product photography, we're starting to move into sticky ground for those guys. So like, having been in that field, what do you think photographers need to do now, if that's, you know, the parts of the industry? Obviously portraiture is probably going to take a little longer before people need to worry about things like CGI coming in. Although for the kind of work you do, that's definitely already something that's, you know, something that's there. But for the people who are in product photography, you know, automotive, stuff like that, what do they need to be considering if they want to stay afloat?
So the interesting thing is that like I look to photography a lot. And so like I've joked with the guys at PRO EDU about it. Like I have sent 3D artists the photography tutorials. You know, Tony's product photography tutorial. I send that to people all the time that work in the industry that I just came from, to learn how to light, to learn how to work with things. Like photographers have such a huge, I mean, huge advantage when it comes to 3D work and CGI in general, even whether it's composites or, you know, what have you. Like the advantage is insane because you already know lighting, you already know composition, you know storytelling, and it's literally just taking the time, similar to how it was the first time you used Photoshop, to kind of just push that, you know, already attained knowledge into another software. And it can get technical. I mean, anything can get technical. So it's one of those things that I think is important for people to understand, that like there is going to be a learning curve, but just take it in baby steps. You know, start to look at it, start to play with, you know, with Blender, with Cinema 4D, with 3ds Max, Maya, like whatever software it is, it doesn't really matter at that point. But having a good understanding of the fundamentals is kind of a big deal. And with the way that CGI is going, it's only getting better. It's not really going to go away. So
Right.
I don't consider it a trend. I mean, if you value what you do as, say, a product photographer, start to dabble in 3D. I mean, that's the way a lot of things are going, and you'll only put yourself behind if you don't start to learn, you know, kind of the next steps to that solution. So
Yeah, sure. And I noticed, so I've been playing in Blender recently and just doing some, you know, simple tutorials to get my feet wet and everything. And one of the things I noticed is it doesn't matter that much how cleverly you build and light something if you don't photograph it in the program correctly. Like if you don't put the camera in the right spot, and you have to,
yeah.
I had to choose what focal length I was using and how close I was to the donut that I made, and where the light was and how many lights I used and what kind of, you know, environment I was putting things in. I mean, all of the same things that photographers have to think about when they go to shoot anything, product photography or whatever, was all of the same things I had to consider when deciding how to actually show this final render.
Yeah, and it's very much that way. It is 3D. You just have control over all of the elements.
Right.
So it's a little bit different than photography in that sense, in that you can not like something and you can change it 2 weeks later after that first image was done and what have you. But you also have control over the lighting, the way the, you know, your 3D models look, the materials, like everything, kind of down to, you know, like the rudimentary level of your scene. And I feel like I feel like photographers have an amazing advantage, because you can take a, you know, a mediocre, or I'll say even horrible 3D model and make it look great. But, you know, if you don't know the photography fundamentals and the basics in that, you know, like it won't look as good as somebody who knows it. So
Sure.
it's, yeah, it's, I mean, I kind of wish that I learned photography first. It would have saved me years of trial and error and trying to learn all of this stuff. Now learning it in CGI and 3D really helped me when I went to photography because I had a better understanding of things. And so now I'm not nearly as much of a technical shooter when I'm behind the camera. I'm a bit more creative because I learned everything on the other side.
Right.
You know, and I've learned my technicalities and that type of knowledge just from experience. But yeah, it's definitely, photographers have an advantage and they should use it.
Oh yeah, for sure. So since we're in the technical side a little bit, I'll ask this question. Ryan Flanagan has asked, he's a local photographer here in Albuquerque. He wants to know, early in your career, did you work with any kinds of photogrammetry for your renderings?
Yeah, so we actually, we worked a lot more with 3D scans, which I guess is sort of kind of all in that same world. So photogrammetry, you know, essentially you're just taking a bunch of photos from different angles and creating a 3D mesh or a point cloud system from that. In 3D scans, you're generally using, you know, a laser scanner to, you know, scan certain products or what have you. A lot of times, you know, they can be used for like certain parts of environments as is, but there's also a lot of, you know, modeling that has to go in to fix the geometry and the textures and get things, you know, ready to use. So most often when we used the photogrammetry or 3D scans in, I guess, really more the workplace that I was at, we would use those as a base for the shape of our 3D models of measurements and so on. So our 3D modelers already had a good base to work from rather than going from scratch. So it's kind of like almost like an advanced, reference photo. So you can kind of go in and build on top of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so kind of following on that, Bobby Thompson wants to know, he said, did a panel at a film festival a couple of years ago. A director who does FX heavy films said that they were close to not needing actors, that it would all be CGI. And he's wondering, do you think that's coming? How soon?
Oh man, I don't know how soon that's coming. Now deep faking has taken things to a whole different level. I mean, we see the face app or whatever it is, that new thing going around.
Yeah, everybody's turning themselves into Rihanna or The Rock.
Yeah, and it looks really good for the most part.
It's crazy.
And so, I mean, I don't think that we're that close to necessarily not needing actors. But I wouldn't sleep on it. I wouldn't say it can't happen. I wouldn't say it can't happen because I mean, as CGI progresses as a whole, like we're really pushing into like this really almost scary world of not knowing what's real or fake. So
yeah, for sure.
We already see it on social, so it's interesting.
I mean, what it comes down to there is the people who they're acting through their models. I mean, they have to understand acting in order to, and often, I mean, when you look at, obviously Lord of the Rings was a big one for kind of building that entire foundation, but you have, an actor being able to help express so that they can see, muscle movement and expression and where things go so that they can start putting that stuff together. So the guys who are building all of this, they still have to understand how all of that works, or potentially it reminds me of the early days of animation where they were bringing in actors and then animating over the stills in the frame to get, like proper movement and everything.
Yeah. So they still do that. So So, I mean, motion capture is a whole different world. Like I'm not really much on, the animation and rigging side of that. But
no, I'm trying to not say anything.
I know, I saw it.
Just wait a minute.
Appreciate you, man. But yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, it's only getting better. It's crazy how, I mean, I was watching, say, I think it was Gemini Man with Will Smith. And, you know, they had this, there were certain parts that was like this weird uncanny valley, you know, but at the same time, you're like, damn, they're so close. Like they're that close. And it's kind of scary when you get that close to being able to pull this off. And I mean, and there's been plenty of other films that, you know, have pulled this off amazingly.
Yeah, I remember thinking that in the Guardians of the Galaxy when they
Yes.
reversed age Kurt Russell, I was like, oh my
Yes.
God, that's like really good.
Yes.
I mean, granted, he had to be there for that, but still, like, dang.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, yeah, it's close. I mean, I don't know if it's close to completely replacing, but
It's on the right road. Yeah.
Yeah, it's obvious. I mean, they're completely recreating full CGI environments at this point, like real time. That's a whole different conversation because that's taking off too.
You're talking about Unreal Engine?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool. I can't wait to get my hands on it.
Yeah, so that's probably, you know, for me, if anybody's actually, you know, wondering, that's probably one of my next little ventures into the creative side is to learn that. So I've never learned Unreal. For the longest time, I was like, oh, no, it's not photoreal enough, this and that. And then boom, they kind of hit you in the last 2 versions of it with awesome stuff. And so I think it's time for me to dive into that.
Yeah, gotta stay on top of what's coming out. The field changes so fast. If you don't stay on top of things, you probably get knocked over by the people who are. And I have to, okay, so Pratik said, Dustin is such a nice guy, but he's so talented that I believe he's just a 3D version of himself right now. How do you know he's not? I have no proof.
The world will never know.
I have no proof.
I mean, I could be AI though. I really could be AI and just deep faking a full conversation that we had 3 months ago.
Totally could be happening right now. So yes, Pratik, you have to be here for all the positive heckling. I expect you now on every show. So don't let me down. Okay, so we've got into a little bit of the technical stuff, and I definitely want to dive in a little bit on, you know, getting kind of a foretaste of what some of these classes that you've put together might be, so people know what to expect and kind of where, you know, photographers need to be looking in order to stay on top. But I also really want to know, moving away from some of the technical stuff for a little bit, what made you take that leap from like full-time CGI into part-time cosplay CGI photo compositor?
When you're working, it's hard. Like when you're working in something you love, it quickly becomes something you don't love. A lot of people know how that feels when you're passionate about something, you enjoy doing it. I started off learning 3D. Gosh, that was 2008. I was on a deployment to Iraq. And you know, yeah, it was Iraq, Kuwait area, and I started picking up 3ds Max. It was one of those things for me. I love Photoshop, and that kind of seemed like the next cool thing. And I quickly started falling in love with like 3D and 3D, you know, sculpting applications, things of that nature. And when I got home from the deployment, it was one of those things that I enjoyed enough that it kind of just pushed, you know, to the next level. And a few years later, I was doing a lot of like album cover work. So album covers, mixtape covers for local artists and whatnot. Ended up getting burnt out on that. Went to school for live action compositing and planned on going into the film industry. That didn't end up working. And yeah, it was one of those things where I'm like, hey, I know this 3D stuff. I'll just go into, you know, kind of the commercial side and, you know, advertisement type work. And that's what I did. And it didn't take too long before I was like, man, is that the best idea? Because you start to lose that passion when it becomes a job and it becomes, you know, kind of more of a stressful thing. And so that's kind of actually, you know, years after I kind of fell in love with 3D, started working in the industry. And then I decided to pick up photography kind of again, because I had let it go for quite a while. And I had picked up photography again and then started doing composite work because I love post-production. So it's kind of one of my things. Yeah. And I feel like during COVID was the worst part of it for me. It was one of those things where you're sitting there and when you work from home, you tend to work a lot longer hours.
Yes, you do. Indeed, you do.
And so I started, I had already been feeling it for years, just kind of the mental fatigue and burnout, from working in the industry. Like the team was great, everything else, but it was great. It was just the work itself that, I kind of got burnt out on. So when COVID hit, it was kind of one of those things where I'm like, man, this is like long hours, like really long hours. And you don't realize it until, it's the end of the day and you kind of get rolling. And so I had already had my ideas and my thought process. It being one of those things I had kind of been, kicking around for, a year or so before COVID even hit. And so when that happened for me, it was really one of those things that was sort of that extra push. And then when Gary at PRO EDU contacted me, I was like, well, okay then. Like, it didn't take much.
Like, I guess this is it.
Yeah, it didn't take much convincing because for me, it's kind of, a dream job in a sense. And so like, I guess to quickly answer your question, it was really more the mental burnout and fatigue that kind of led me to do that cosplay photography, more of the 3D 3D and the CGI fun stuff on the side as more of a creative outlet. So it was something that I really was still passionate about. I do charge for it, but it's definitely not something that I allow myself to mentally get fatigued on. And everything's changing so much all the time. And I'm constantly inspired. But yeah, so yeah, when PRO EDU contacted me, it was one of those things that I'm like, hey, well, I have time to balance now. If I accept, this position, I'll have time to balance. I'll have, time to do the R&D and creative stuff that I'd like.
Right.
I love mentoring and teaching others. And so for me, that was kind of a no-brainer. And then on top of that, there's a lot of room, for me to grow personally. To become a better mentor, a better instructor, get coached by, the awesome team that we're a part of and the community. It's one of those things that it was just kind of a no-brainer. And I didn't really even think twice about it.
Yeah. I think a lot of people have to be able to identify with that when you take a thing that you love and you turn it into a job. It's really difficult to maintain that same level of passion for the thing that you're doing. That's something I talked with Tyler Jacobson about when he was on the show. And, he said, I have to set aside specific time for myself just to do the fun stuff and remind myself that painting is fun, because otherwise it takes a lot of the joy of creation out of it, because now you're on a deadline and now you're doing repetitive tasks and it's not just a new thing every time. It's, it's the 8 millionth chair, but different lighting or, whatever else it is. So have you always kind of loved film, cinema, comic books? Like, what made cosplay the thing that you wanted to jump into?
Oh man, so I actually wasn't a nerd my entire life.
I feel so betrayed.
Yeah, so
shame.
We always, when I was a kid, I always liked to play, superheroes and this and that, but it wasn't something for me that I really connected with, I guess, is the easiest way to put it. I grew up in the foster system. So I was adopted like just after my 10th birthday. And it was like every year it was like a new family, this and that. And so for me, it was, I didn't have like that connection with certain things. Like I didn't really stick to, any of that until I got older. I was probably, I think maybe 16. is kind of old for that kind of world. But yeah, I was a bit older, and that's when I started getting into, into different, multiverses and everything else, and kind of going down the rabbit hole. Yeah, but for me, it was really, I think the cosplay side of it is really, in a weird sense, like a replacement for me at times from the desire that I had to get into the motion picture industry as a visual effects artist.
Right.
And so
take that stupid motion picture industry.
Yeah.
Regret fit now.
Yeah. So it was kind of one of those interesting ways. I mean, for me, it was, I mean, I guess I can sort of explain like the scenario there. So years back, I'm doing all of these album covers, mixtapes, this and that, and thought I knew what I was doing with business. I was too stinking young-minded to even know what the hell I was doing. Ended up getting super burnout. Went to Full Sail University. Knew what I wanted to go for. We're doing kind of motion graphics at the time. I was doing graphic design. I was doing CGI, composites and stuff like that. And I decided to go to Full Sail really for a new experience. I kind of reached a point to where I'm like, okay, this isn't enough. And, obviously with Photoshop and After Effects and say Cinema 4D that I was using, you can always dive deeper. Just that burnout at the time led me to want something new. So I was like, let's go to school. Let's figure this stuff out. And I'll start working in movies. It was, I've always loved movies. So I kind of get into school, and I really pushed it hard. And so I didn't really look at school as much something to specifically learn the software, but it was more learning about the industry and then kind of a segue into the industry, kind of opening that door. And so I went and I pushed really hard. It worked. I ended up graduating with a bunch of awards and valedictorian and all this stuff. And a lot of people didn't know that, like, right in the middle of my schooling, my middle child was born. And so me, like, growing up without a father, I was like, man, I don't know. I don't know if I can live like this contractor artist life, because the industry, really any industry creatively, can be tough. And it was just something that, after researching for quite a while, it wasn't something that was going to really be able to allow me to afford to enjoy life while having my family with me. And I just didn't see it, in my mind, I didn't really see it as an option to be gone for, 8 to 10 months out of a year,
right,
working on contracts. So I decided not to take the opportunities to move into other studios from there. And went with more, I guess, comfortable, like work.
Like you do.
Yeah. And so for me, cosplay was like, it kind of met that mark for me, so like cosplayers are super talented anyway. I mean, I can't even fathom what it takes to do half of this stuff. I just enjoy shooting it and, kind of putting my bit of magic on this stuff.
Right.
But it's one of those things for me that it's a really cool opportunity to connect with like other awesome individuals. Like not only just on the creative side, but the way that as a whole, the cosplay community is, all of the charity stuff, all of the things that they're doing, it's just inspiring as a whole.
Yeah. And so super creative.
Yeah. And so the fact that like I get to work with other creatives shooting stuff that I would have maybe liked to work on anyway, movie posters, stuff like that, it kind of just brought everything full circle. And so that's kind of where it started. And then I started shooting at Comic-Cons with that. That's a whole different, oh my goodness, that's like crazy. So Comic-Cons for me are like super interesting because, I started off with the Comic-Con stuff when I was kind of starting my YouTube channel. And that was like, man, look, if all I got to do is pay to rent a booth or two for this weekend, and I have like 6 months worth of content from like, from all these different shoots. Like, it's amazing. Like, I don't have to like shoot for 6 months, because I was working in the industry, so it was busy. And then it just kind of took off from there. And, like the relationships that I was building with, the cosplayers and the reach that, that kind of took off. And so, yeah, hopefully the big one this year doesn't get canceled.
Oh, I know.
I'm like,
so sad.
But yeah, it's just amazing. Cosplayers are awesome. They kind of fill that creative void for me. And it's fun. So
yeah, for sure.
Long story short.
Right. It's fun. Yeah. So do you feel like, having kind of grown up the way that you did with those kind of struggles, do you think that contributed to any of the way that you approach creativity, like, or why you approach creativity? I know for some people that was like a way of escape or a way to feel fulfilled or find a safe place. Did any of that come into play for you at all?
I think it my past life my previous life my past life experience.
My past life
from way back. But no, I think the biggest thing, and hopefully my wife's not watching this, but it made me really hard-headed.
She knows, I'm sure.
yeah. Hopefully I'm not talking too loud because they're like right up there. But it made me really hard-headed in the sense that I kind of got thicker skin. After many years, actually, I won't say right away. I used to be kind of like an angry kid while I was trying to figure myself out. But it eventually kind of taught me to be fine with myself and not focus so much on what, other people thought of me. And so that's really good because I feel like that's something that deters a lot of artists when they're starting off
you're so right.
Any field. So it kind of helped me there. It gave me, really more mental like fortification. Like it allowed me to attack something and just continue through it. I'm sure you've seen like the videos of these guys wearing football pads running through blocks of ice.
Yeah.
And, like that's kind of how it was. It was just like, block, 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 block. And so, for me, I guess it's like I like the adversity of learning something new. Like I like that weird thing in your head that's like tells you no. And so I used to do a lot of stuff. And so Ryan, I'm seeing his comment here. Let's see, as time passes and you develop and extend your skills, experience further. Yeah, so you do experience a lot less burnout. So the thing about it's kind of interesting because this is kind of, along those same lines. I used to be like a jack of all trades, quote unquote.
Sure.
And I used to, be into, dabbling with audio engineering and sound design and really enjoyed the mixing mastering process. I used to be into like cinematography and video work. And then I got into graphic design and it was like this whole big slew of things. And it wasn't until I really just was like honest with myself. I'm like, what do you really enjoy? Like, not what are you just hustling to make a buck, but what do you really enjoy doing? And that was like Photoshop. And I enjoy 3D work. Luckily for me, the two of those pair perfectly. And here I am. But the process for that isn't easy, So kind of going back to your, to your question, like that really the life experiences really just made it really nice for me in a sense, I guess, once I got over myself, as a kid. Once I got out of my own head, I started to really look at who I am, started becoming a bit more self-aware. We've all got work to do with that. But once I did that, I started to realize what strengths I had rather than everything that was holding me back. I used to blame everybody and their brother for everything negative that happened in my life. And now I just kind of don't care to blame anybody else. You get to a point where you know, say I pick up a project and I fail on that project, like it's my fault. You know, you get to a point where, you know, amazing things happen when you stop blaming other people for your issues. And so that's probably what, you know, one of the biggest things, you know, life experience that I had previous. It kind of, you know, built me a bit thicker skinned, you know, to kind of take adversity, to take feedback and criticism. I learned a lot of what not to do, you know, from various people in my life, and just kind of use that to like propel me forward and learn from other people's mistakes.
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful thing. And I hope that the people who watch really take that to heart, because like you said, so many artists and photographers, CGI artists, digital artists in general, anybody, I know that we feel this way. We walk into this and we hit struggles and we start going, well, you know, I can't do that because I'm a mom and I just don't have the time. And they have the time because they're young and single. And here I am, you know, with 3 kids and I can't do the thing. Or, you know, I never learned this, or whatever it is. Like it's so easy to take our issues and allow those things to stop us from moving forward. And the truth is that we can have beautiful things come out of hard experiences. We can have strength be built out of difficulties. We can have resilience and grit and all of those things come out of difficult circumstances if we recognize that they're there and we allow them to happen. So for the people who are watching, guys, your past doesn't have to define your current struggles. It can be the thing that helps you overcome them. So
yeah, I mean, a lot of it, I think, especially, I mean, I see it all the time in social, you know, people, a lot of it also comes to with like who you surround yourself with.
Oh, absolutely.
So let's just hit this real quick, because this is a different part of, you know, the conversation.
Hit it.
But so for me, for example, so those people who don't know, I have a very like tight circle generally of like actual friends. And I look to keep people in my life that are, you know, generally positive. I mean, everybody has their ups and downs. But I have a lot of, you know, acquaintances. I have a lot of people that I, you know, I mingle with and I enjoy and I love spending time with. But I have a very small group of people that I expect to be honest with me on things that I needed. You know, like it's interesting. And so, you know, part of, you know, the growth for me. So say, for example, you know, my wife is super, super supportive. I mean, we've been together since we were kids, essentially. And she's been through like this entire journey with me, sometimes like single mom in it, you know, holding the fort down while I'm, you know, working stupid hours. I sacrificed a whole lot of sleep. So she kind of like had my back with that stuff early on.
Fist bump for the wives out there, for the other partners holding it down. Yeah.
Yeah. When you find that one that supports you, you know what I'm saying? Just, they got rings for a reason. But yeah, so but you know, seriously, it's one of those things that, you know, like surround yourself with like good companions, like surround yourself with people that are going to help you and push you, like not just help you, not give you handouts, but push you to progress. And that's super huge. I mean, you know, a lot of the buddies that I look to, that I, you know, confide in when I have issues, if I'm feeling down, if whatever, you know, a lot of times, you know, they're like, dude, suck it up. It's really not that bad. You know, like we all vent, but I think being able, you know, the ability to choose where that happens and how that happens can be a big deal. And surrounding yourself by people that'll, you know, not just lift you up, but like kind of kick you in the butt and really get you going times. It's super important. So
yeah, 100% agree. Yeah, you are, what do they say? You're the sum of the 5 people you surround yourself with the most, or something like that. Yeah. So yeah, if you find the people that you're around complain more than they lift you up, then that's probably a good sign that something needs to change. So real quick, Gary is asking, where do you get your inspiration for ideas in creating that which doesn't exist?
Oh man, Gary. I get asked this
Bringing
question
in the
a
hard
lot.
questions, Gary.
So, man. It's hard for me to really say where I specifically get inspiration from. I get inspired by like sometimes people like more than their artwork. So like Nicole, for instance, like when you have like creatives talking and we start to talk about all of these different scenarios and worlds and lives and all this crazy stuff, and then all of a sudden it pops in my head. I'm like, oh man, I could do this crazy thing with it. I just, maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. I might just be crazy. But you know, realistically, inspiration, if I'm going from like image inspiration, artstation.com. So if you guys don't know, artstation.com is amazing. That's kind of where I get a lot of inspiration from. A lot of my inspiration, even for photography, comes from the 3D and CGI world. And part of that comes with the fact that I, you know, or really more is because I like post-production so much that I get inspired by, you know, the shapes and the compositions and the lighting of certain things. It's very, you know, stuff that doesn't exist to me. I mean, unless we're talking alien planets and, you know, things of that nature, you know, a lot of things do exist, or sets for them exist. And so if I am, say, you know, have a client that's, you know, a Halo cosplayer and you want, you know, he wants me to put him on this planet. I mean, I can go and research and look up alien planet and figure that out. And, you know, maybe not specifically, you know, kind of swag jack, you know, the creators of Halo, but, you know, I can, yeah, it's interesting. That's a question that every time I get asked, like, where my inspiration comes from, it's, you know, I'm like, I don't know. I kind of browse the internet and tell
Yeah,
me.
like places.
Like,
It just comes from
but
places.
yeah, I spend a lot of time on ArtStation, Behance. Don't tell my wife, but I spend time on Pinterest too. Super cool. Yeah, so that's I browse. I like to be inspired by other creatives, and just using that inspiration to create, you know, my own work from. I don't really like, you know, to copy, although I feel like, you know, the wheel's already been invented. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, at this point, we're too many years into, you know, somebody's got something pretty similar.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, in my line of work, like what I'm doing, when I look at other people's stuff and I see that similarity, I'm like, damn, they're better than I am. Like, they killed
I
me.
know. And then you're like, oh no.
Like, let me just shut up and go back to my little corner real quick, you know.
Yep.
But yeah, it's I get inspired all over the place, man. It's definitely a creative world. So
Agreed. Yeah. I think at this point, it's less about the idea and more about your interpretation of the idea, you know, and how you
agreed.
present the idea, because it's you and who you are and your experiences and even your biases and your prejudices and your understanding and your preferences, all of those things that come together to make you the artist that you are. And that is what determines how you present what you create to the
For
world.
sure.
So
Yeah.
I find that that is the most important part. So we have 5 minutes technically, guys. So if you have more questions for Dustin, get those into the comments real quick. And in the meantime, Dustin, let's get in a little bit about, so we know you've got some tutorials coming out with PRO EDU,
Yeah.
and a lot of this kind of centered around moving in this direction of CGI and what that's going to look like. So without giving too much away, what are kind of the important things for photographers to know? Like, what can they be thinking about now and take action on looking forward to those tutorials?
Yeah. Man, you know,
I know that was kind of broad, but
yeah, that was a bit
sorry,
broad.
I know.
So we'll just start with this. So the tutorial that we have coming out is huge. It's quite the tutorial. So it's one of those things for me that I think the biggest understanding that you can have going into this, you know, say my tutorial, for example, just specifically would be to have an open mind, right? So like, don't look at learning CGI or 3D as, you know, like a crippling experience. Um, that's the biggest thing is mindset. Now, you know, like we're using certain software in this tutorial, and if you don't want to use that software, the fundamentals are all the same. Um, so learning those base fundamentals, really diving into the software, like photographers, I promise you guys have a leg up. Like I really do not lie about that. Um, and so, you know, this tutorial is going to be really kind of encompassing a whole lot of experience into one tutorial. So when you're starting essentially from like ground zero and working your way through this, you're going to be covering a lot of the things that I spent years searching for. And that was kind of really my biggest, I guess, my biggest desire for the way that we laid the tutorial out, is to kind of take away from the learning curve by making things easier to follow and have access to right away. Um, and really by the end of it, like you'll be able to get in the software and create your own cool looking stuff. And, you know, we do the main tutorial and then we have, you know, some cool demos. I can't even talk about this stuff.
I know.
What are we talking? I'm trying to be like very filtered, very
right. Yeah. Don't get into it too much. But
yeah, so go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say maybe what we could do then is just kind of like remind photographers and even you know, other artists who are looking to kind of move into that realm. There are good reasons to start moving in that direction. I mean, we talked a little bit already about, you know, how many industries are becoming really CGI heavy. And so this is something like, obviously now you're using, which we'll tie that into Gary's question real quick, which he asks, how do you decide when to use 2D editing techniques versus 3D elements? There is a lot of space here for photographers. I talked to Renee Robin about this and a couple of other people on the, you know, on the show, but like for fantasy photographers, this is a boon. I mean, this gives us the opportunity to add some of the things that really don't exist in real life, or you know, in other industries. Like learning this, maybe will save your job, but maybe really give you the opportunity to create the things that you've always wanted to create but can't do for yourself right now.
So for me, you know, learning 3D, or I should say not even necessarily learning 3D. Like I know that's good. We've talked about that. Implementing 3D into my photography, just the stuff that I do, not the product renders, just the creative cosplay, fantasy stuff. It's taken things to a whole different level. I mean, I don't travel to shoot certain locations just to have stock photos. I mean, I live in an interesting environment for some maybe, but it's not to me. So it's not very inspiring in that sense. I feel like that's kind of like most hometowns. It's like, you know, hi Kelly. You know, so it's interesting, man. Fantasy photographers, 3D is literally going to blow your mind. Like, it doesn't matter what you want to create. It's literally just a matter of execution, and you have it at your fingertips. You can create your own stock, build your own libraries, have 3D models and materials and lighting setups and all of this stuff that make things so fast and easy when it comes time to create, like truly be creative, that you don't have to worry about technicalities too much. You know, for product photographers, it's a game changer. Like some of the stuff that you might spend so much time building a set with and nitpicking light setups and go through this and that, which is all necessary. The ability to just kind of like click a button and make that happen, you know, is, I mean, it's great. Like I've seen so many, especially more in the automotive world, because that's where I was working at, you know, prior to my previous industry position. So many of our guys that were lighting vehicles, you know, CGI 3D scenes, were automotive photographers, and they completely blew my mind. Like there was stuff that they would do and build with 3D lighting setups. And I was like, I don't know what you did, man, but it's amazing. You know, and they would like save out these certain sets and stuff that they would build out, and they could just throw other vehicles in there and change, you know, the floor color or the walls. And I'm just like,
right.
Dude, you guys completely kill this. You know, 3D for photographers is going to be a big deal. 3D to other creatives is a huge deal. It's just something that allows you to create outside of that realm of reality that we live in. Whether you want to say do something like ArcViz or architectural rendering, you know, you can do that and completely blow clients' minds. And on the creative side, like you can just, I mean, in my case, sometimes just like completely creative nut job. Like I just go out and do whatever. I start throwing stuff in and, you know, whatever, you know, I don't know, like a skull with honey dripping out of it. And, I don't know. Sometimes I just think of crazy stuff. And yeah, you could do that. And it's like just kind of very nice and interactive and, you know, fun to work with. So yeah, it's kind of built for everybody, really. I mean, so many different creative fields. CGI is kind of coming. So
yeah. And I mean, even looking at that, I know prominent painters who will use CGI to build their world out, so they have proper references for, you know, size, the way light behaves, all of that kind of stuff. So you know, I know of, you know, painters who do that and who work commercially, and they'll build their scene in 3D first, so they can play with the angles and figure out, okay, so I know what the scale looks like and how the light should be behaving on these different, you know, materials and whatever. You know, it takes a lot of the guesswork out, even for people who are working in those fields. So you know, this moving in this direction it can't hurt you. It can really only help
propel you forward.
Yeah, build what you want. So, and then even as, you know, so, you know, going back to kind of what Gary said, like when you're working in these, what makes you decide, okay, this should be done in 3D, or this could potentially be done using something like Photoshop?
Man, so I like this. I like you, Gary. I don't think we've ever had a chance to chat, but hit me up on Facebook and we'll have a good conversation. I cheat a lot.
As any good creative should.
Yeah. So, you know, it really depends. It depends on the project and what that project requires, first of all. I mean, I a lot of times when you're working in CGI or just in 3D, see, they have me calling it CGI now. It's when you're working in 3D software and you're building out your scenes and getting all of this stuff going, you know, generally speaking, I look to have like a 90% completion. Like it's that product looks amazing. That image is great. All I have to do is say camera raw, you know, processing. Yes, we do that on 3D renders too. And just start to kind of build up post from there to, you know, everything from, you know, just the raw processing to the final grade and just making things look right. Now, when it comes to changes that will be made in 3D versus 2D, it really just depends on how much time it's going to take. So if I'm working on, say, a client project and they've got we'll say 3 rounds of review, and I submit that first, you know, say lighting and rendering, your lighting and material side of it, I'm not really going to do anything in post-production at that point because I still know I have a couple rounds of review left. Now, if I'm at the end of the project and I have a blue paint that they now want black, I'm not going to go back and re-render the entire image. You know, so I'll just Photoshop that real quick and pray that that's the last revision that we have. But yeah, that's kind of really what it is. It's one of those things. It's a time thing for me. I don't want to say I'm creatively lazy when I work. I'll just put it that way. I like to find the fastest way, especially for my fun stuff, my creative stuff. It's the fastest way from point A to point Z without, you know, hitting every single one of those letters in between. I just kind of like, boop, start skipping down the line.
Yeah.
but there is really no good. It's all dependent on what you need.
So let me expand that. Let me expand that just a little bit. And first, I've talked to so many professional people who are either illustrators or anything, concept artists in the industry who were like, yeah, I use photo bashing. Yeah, I do this and that.
Yeah,
like, yeah, whatever's going to get me what I need as fast as possible. 100%. Which some of us we get a little bit precious and we're like, oh, how dare. And then people who do it for a living are like, no, you must. I'm working on a deadline. I got to go fast. But to expand on Gary's question a little bit. So let's say, one of your Batman shots. Instead of using a stock photo for a car that's blown up in the background, build it in 3D. I mean, how do you make those decisions, right? Because you could go on somewhere and find stock photos of all kinds, ancient ruins or a blown up city or whatever. So what makes 3D in those cases a better decision over 2D assets?
Laziness. I do not like to search specifically for stock. Like if I'm say that you're talking about the Batman scene where he's on top of the car and flowy kid.
Right.
Okay, look, that was one of those things for me. It cracks me up because that people ask me about that one all the time, and I'm just like, dude, I just got tired of looking. So it's one of those where you have a certain aspect ratio you want to hit. You have a certain resolution that you want to hit. And for me, I just was not finding images of the right perspective with the right lighting with, this and that. Now, do I know how to change lighting on objects and do this? Like, yes, I can do all that in Photoshop. But it bugged me after like 2 hours of searching for images and just coming up with like literally kind of patches of a road that would like look good. And I'm just like, screw it. I'll just do, like a lot of people aren't even really gonna look at that anyway. So I just threw together a quick scene using library assets. Like I didn't build the entire scene.
Right.
And yeah, so I kind of kit bash is what we call it in the 3D world. You just kind of kit bash everything together, and then you light it, put materials on some things, other things you don't put materials on. You just overlay soft light textures.
Smoke.
Yeah, and then atmosphere all day. It helps you out a lot. It's resources are a huge thing. I don't care what field you're in, whether you're in Photoshop or 3D, whatever it is. Resources are huge. If you're just starting in 3D, kind of get them as you need them. Artstation.com, they have a lot of cool stuff and it's like really well priced. But yeah, so it's pretty cool. We got a lot of other cool things coming up at PRO EDU, and I can't talk about it because it's gonna slap me.
I know, don't get us in trouble.
So yeah, guys, library assets all day. They'll save your life. Doesn't matter whether they're materials, whether they're lighting setups, full scenes, they're out there.
Right on. So let me know if I need to let you go right away or if you have a couple more minutes, because I feel like I still have a couple more questions on that.
Yeah, all the kids are asleep. We're good.
I know, right? Yes. Okay, so as you're talking about that, it was making me wonder. So a couple of additional things. So say you have, you already have this shot of Batman and now you need to build a scene around him, right? I can imagine that being able to light a scene in a 3D program has got to be a huge benefit for photographers who are going to composite in images of people into a scenario rather than like searching for, like you said, I need to find something that's from a low angle where the light is coming from a certain place. Otherwise, you have to then kill the lighting and try to recreate that using brushes and, everything else in Photoshop. Doing that in 3D has to make a huge difference in believability.
Yeah. So, oh my gosh, I love 3D lighting. I love it so much. I mean, just like I love photography, like lighting and setting things up. But your ability to adjust things on the fly is insane. So funny thing about that, you know, that Batman scene in particular, or even the one on the rooftop, we'll say the one on the rooftop, that was actually a disaster and nobody knows it. Holy cow. So I didn't really have any of my, I call them tracking markers on my set. And, you know, not the way that I wanted them, that I kind of thought after the fact, I'm like, oh, I should have done it this way. So I didn't get my 3D camera calibrated properly. Should have removed my distortion in, you know, software or whatever. Didn't do all that stuff. So here we are, and we're sitting there, and I want to put these guys on a building, skyscrapers behind them, all this cool stuff, and I completely had to fudge it. Like, if you look at that scene, like, the buildings are warped, and I mean, really bad. But nobody knows why, because it's more about the image that you put out than, you know, the one that's in your face. And that was really hard. Like, I was kicking myself so hard for that one, because that was one of those shots that you're talking to your customer, your client about, and you're like, dude, this is going to be amazing. And then you get to software and you're like,
oh my God.
Yeah. So, you know, what worked out in my favor was, instead of having, you know, like you said, instead of having to find certain assets to fit that scene, I could just kind of grab a pre-made, you know, kit bash asset, throw that in, start working with lighting. And, you know, essentially what I do is I'm just, you know, kind of placing lights to match my subjects first. See how that looks. And then I go through and will oftentimes kind of build up the background from there, just to kind of get the composition. And for me, because I've been using Photoshop, you know, for many more years, even than I was necessarily like heavily into 3D, I kind of can envision like what that final product is going to be once I start getting to a certain point in that 3D process. And so once I got to a point where I thought I was good, I clicked render. And then the Photoshop work came in, because I didn't check my textures at like a full resolution scale. It was a late night. And so, yeah, then the Photoshop, like the retouching process begins. And then you have to decide, which is kind of another big, you know, question, like when is an image finished, right?
Right.
And oh my goodness, I had to call it, and thank God nobody called it out, because I would have felt so bad, because in my head I'm like, I have to fix that.
Yeah.
And I never went back and fixed it, even for my portfolio piece. I never went back and fixed it. I'm trying to work on like knocking down my own pride to, like, you know, just create. And it's
yes.
tough.
Yeah. Oh God, that is so true.
Yeah. So 3D lighting. I like to ramble. You notice that? I feel sorry for any of you guys that actually like get on a video call with me and we're like on a Facebook chat and we're just talking and it's like 6 hours later.
Hey, you know what? People are getting a lot of fantastic information, so don't apologize for that. And then I can only imagine as well, like you can light it specific to how you want it, but then you have, like, once you've built that, like you said, that goes into your library. So now you have that asset that you can use 50 million different ways for potential future projects. So you're investing in your future work by building that stuff out for yourself.
Yeah.
Which is super rad as far as I'm concerned. Like anything that I can put away for future stuff and be like, oh yeah, I have these broken buildings. I'll just use those now. Like, hello.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, libraries are so amazing. I mean, I could talk about resources and sites and all this stuff all day. But there's a lot. So
so buy the tutorials.
We talk about a few good ones. So
no, good information. All right, so Pratik says, can I just get a job just lighting people's models in post? It sounds perfect. That's a real job. That is a job.
Lighting artist. I'm telling you, man, like my mind has been blown by photographers that get into CGI and they wreak havoc on. I mean, once you understand that you can creatively do what you want, how you want it, and you're not bound by gear, yes, there's a software cost, but I spend more than that on like my toys.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
it's, oh man, the amount of stuff that you can simply create is insane. And you can create one 3D model and have it look 1,000 different ways with different lights, with different materials. It's, yeah, I love 3D
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. Oh, I need a crowd in the background. Let me just
Yeah.
multiply this guy in different positions. I'll put some haze there. Nobody will know it's the same guy.
Yeah.
But clever
Trick, actually.
tricks.
That's an amazing trick.
Like,
a little bit of depth of field, some motion blur, and
nobody will know.
nobody knows.
Yep. All
We'll
right,
just
guys.
desaturate them.
I know. See, I've got all the good ideas. All right. So we have already exceeded our hour just a little bit. So as we get to these last couple questions that I always end with, if you have any last questions that are quick, get them in now. But in the meantime, Dustin,
Yes.
Tell people where they can find you online if they want to know more, if they want to learn any more of your tips and tricks. So we know that the tutorials are coming out, but you have a YouTube channel as well where you give away a lot of great information. So where can people find you?
Yeah. So YouTube channel is Dustin Valkema, like just my name, plain old boring me. Instagram Dustin Valkema, Facebook Dustin Valkema. It's kind of all just my name. So
it's the best way to go about it.
Yeah. It's pretty easy to find. But yeah, go ahead and kind of add me, subscribe, comment, do all that stuff, and connect. I like to connect with other creatives. Really, it doesn't matter where you're at in your journey. I kind of, I have a thing for kind of mingling and networking. So let's chat.
Yeah, go show the man some love, guys. All right. And the last question that we always do before we hit the end is I want to know your why. So why create out of all the possible career fields out there? Why make stuff for a living?
Oh, man.
You should have been prepared for this one. You'll be all right. You'll be all right.
It's a release. It's a release from reality. Quite honestly, like, we all know that we have things that I guess can fuel depression, can fuel anxiety, can fuel, creative blocks and all of this other stuff. And for me, like, being a creative is just a means to release that, obviously self-expression. But, for me, it's just, it started off really at a young age is a way for me to kind of like release my anger. I was a super, super, super angry kid. And that was because I had the wrong perspective on life and I blamed everybody else for my issues. And it made me mad. And so I, used to draw crazy demon creatures and this and that and whatever. And I remember getting in trouble for it multiple times because it was like some of it was dark artwork and it was, parents didn't really like that. But, being a creative for me has just always been a form of release. Now it's, kind of a form of fun. I mean, not that it doesn't, I don't get like my issues out in creative stuff like that's, I still do that, but now it's like fun when I do it. So yeah, creativity for me, I mean, it's kind of like almost a weird drug at this point. Like I enjoy it and I like learning new things, and it's constantly adverse. Like you're constantly having roadblocks, you're constantly having like hurdles to jump. And that's not just 3D, that's just being a creative in general. Like we're just essentially problem solvers and making it happen. So I enjoy it. Yeah, it's a passion of mine. So
right on, man. All right, so we'll get to Bobby's last question and then we'll head on out. So he says, agreed, need to learn new things, but I'm probably maxed out on skills. I don't believe that is the thing, Bobby. I don't think that can ever be a thing. At least I hope not, because I will cry right now. But can you talk about what filmmakers should do to work well with a CGI artist? So what makes it easier on your end to work with a photographer or a filmmaker to get a good final product?
So if you are a photographer that's looking to hire a CGI artist, learn the fundamentals. I don't care if you're a client, if you're an aspiring, artist to get to that point, you want to be an intern, learn the fundamentals, because, it's tough as, and I've been on both ends. Like I hire, other contractors all the time for doing stuff. I'm not a huge, into 3D modeling. It's just not my creative passion. So I hire other people for that. But what's amazing is that I understand the process. I understand what it takes to get there. Even the work that kind of goes into it. So learning the fundamentals, not that you have to be the best, 3D artist. If you want somebody else to do that work, that's fine. But understand the process so that you can creatively, create feedback that's constructive. If you're a 3D artist wanting to work with photographers, client training all day long is patience and client training and coming with an open mind, because it gets very easy as creatives, to get feedback and just be, disgruntled all the time because I don't know why they're asking this. Well, explain it to them, just have a little bit of patience. On both ends, really, it goes a long way. So yeah, fundamentals are a huge thing, Bobby. It's learn just the basic 3D terminology, Google 3D pipeline, check it out, learn about that, the stages that it has to go through to be like a final product. All of that stuff is huge, and it's going to help your relationship more than anything with that artist. So
right on.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, Bobby, I hope that helped. Everybody who showed up today, Bobby, Pratik, Gary, both Jason's, James and Ryan, guys. If I didn't say your name, it's just because I don't want to go back and search for everybody's name. Sorry. I love you all. Anyway, thank you guys so much for being here, for asking amazing questions like you always do. Make sure that you give this video a like, that you subscribe if you're not subscribed, and share, because obviously there are a lot of people out there who need to hear about where we're headed and what CGI can do for their career and how it can benefit them, so they can use this amazing information that Dustin has been laying on us all evening. So make sure that you guys share. And Dustin, thanks, man.
Thank you.
I'm super excited to have you on.
Yeah, no, it's great. We'll have to just do this again in like a year. We'll just do kind of like a reunion thing from this point.
Yeah, reunion shows. Just talk about where everybody's at now, and I can show you all the cool donuts I've made.
You know what though? I mean, like real talk, I've been doing 3D stuff for a long freaking time. I made the donut.
Yeah.
Why don't I share my donut? Low key, because it sucks. It was so much worse. I was like, I know how to do all this stuff. It is like, man, learning a new software is not always the easiest thing to do.
Oh man, truth.
It's necessary, but it's not easy.
So guys, we've all got our donut.
Yeah, we all got donuts.
Yeah, don't let your ego get in there. We've all got our donuts. All right, man. So guys, make sure you go and show Dustin some love on all of his goodies. I'm going to include obviously his, links to all of his stuff down in the description of the video after everything. So go and check those out. Next week, be here at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, because I will be interviewing the amazing, the wonderful, the friendly, and the lovely Dennis Dunbar. We're going to talk about working in the commercial field, his work for, Harry Potter, and all of the other cool, Jumanji and all of the other cool films that he's done movie posters for, and what it's like working as a commercial retoucher. So be here for that so you guys can ask Dennis all the questions. And until next week.
I'll be here. You guys better be here.
Yeah, right? If Dustin's here, you better be here. All right, everybody.
Awesome.
See you next Tuesday.
Bye, guys.